Good morning. Good morning to everybody, excellencies, colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to introduce myself as I have the privilege of chairing our virtual meeting today. I am Gianpaolo Neri, head of the South Asia desk at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. And since a few weeks, I took over the role of a focal point for Italy to the Indian Ocean Rim Associations, or IORA, replacing Mario Vattani, who is currently serving as Italy's ambassador to Singapore. Today's event is part of, as you know, the 2021 edition of the Festival della Diplomazia, and it takes place in the framework of Italy's dialogue partnership with IORA, which began in November 2009. So I am very glad that Acting Secretary General of IORA, Gatot Gunawan, will take part to our discussion, and we will be followed by Gramenos Mastroianni, Deputy Secretary General of the Union for the Mediterranean, or UFM. I believe it is particularly appropriate that Italy, being a member of the Union for the Mediterranean and a dialogue partner of IORA, works together with this organization to stimulate the development of an enlarged cooperation area, covering both Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. We also have the pleasure of welcoming to this virtual meeting Mr. Paolo Glisenti, Italian General Commissioner for Expo Dubai, where the Italian Pavilion will showcase a futuristic vision of maritime economy during the so-called Water Week next March. And somehow it represents an ideal trade union between the two macro regions. We also look forward to cooperate with the incoming presidency of Bangladesh, of IORA presidency of Bangladesh, with the help of His Excellency Ambassador Shamima Shan. And we also have a message, a pre-recorded message from Professor Salemul Haq, Director of the International Center for Climate Change and Development in Dhaka. Also ambassador and representatives from other IORA and Mediterranean countries, such as Malta, Mozambique, Slovenia, Sri Lanka, as well as the United Arab Emirates, which is the outgoing IORA presidency, are connected. Please, you're not in the speakers list, but of course, feel free to raise your virtual hand if you wish to intervene. Italy has taken quite a proactive and concrete approach to its partnership with IORA, and it is doing so by bringing together the relevant Italian stakeholders, both private and public organizations, which join forces within the Italy-IORA committee and managed to develop so far, and I would say despite the pandemic, a number of relevant activities with IORA and its member states. Some of these stakeholders, such as Federazione del Mare, Costa Crociere, and Federpesca, are all represented here today, and I thank you for your participation. We will also have a representative from Edison, leading Italian energy company, very active in the field of energy transition, with interesting projects in the Eastern Mediterranean. We will hear also their insights, because today's meeting, as you know, is dedicated to the challenge of climate change from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean. You know for sure that climate change is, the impact of climate change is particularly evident in both macro areas. Global heating is accelerating the rate of ocean warming, leading to an increased number and intensity of cyclones and storms with devastating consequences for littoral states. In the Mediterranean, we are already experiencing a reduction in summer rainfall and continuous wildfires, which represent a very serious threat to biodiversity and as well as to health. In both regions, degradation of coastal and marine ecosystems threatens the physical, economic, and food security of coastal communities. Therefore, the fight against climate change the acceleration of energy transition, the containment of emissions, the protection of biodiversity and ecosystems are increasingly important. I would say life-saving for both the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. And they represent the key points to set a shared and positive agenda. Pursuing those goals would for sure contribute to foster sustainable well-being and social inclusion, especially to the benefit of coastal communities. But to achieve these goals, an active international cooperation at all levels is crucial. Allow me to say that this is a particularly significant moment for Italy to play an active role in such cooperation, in light of our G20 presidency and co-presidency of COP26, which, as you know, Italy has placed the fight against climate change at the heart of the international agenda. We will host the G20 summit at the end of this month, and we recently hosted the COP26 preparatory events, including the pre-COP summit and the youth event. In this endeavor, as a final remark, I would really like to recall it, Italy's main goal is basically to raise the level of ambition of all stakeholders and the entire international community, with the goal, of course, to accelerate energy transition towards climate neutrality by 2050. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to our speakers to hear their thoughts. And I would like to invite Mario Mattioli, President of the Federazione del Mare, to deliver his introductory remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neri. Thanks a lot, and really I'm very pleased to cooperate with you in the continuity that we've had with Mr. Battani and with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It is a very important cooperation, and all the points that you have raised are definitely the main points on the agenda of all the stakeholders that do contribute to the blue economy and in general terms to the IORA works. So it's extremely important, and we will be following it. As stressed, the IORA stakeholders are public and private organizations, universities and research institutes. They have played an important role in supporting the Italian government's decision to initiate a procedure for acquiring the status of IORA Dialogue Partners. I have the honor to chair the Federazione del Mare, that is the federation of all the associations that have in common the sea, so in a way blue economy. That's 18 groups, and they comprise the most important sectors, from the shipbuilding to the management of the ships, including leisure boats, including of course fisheries and other research institutes. Since 2020, we have actively participated in the implementation phase of this privileged dialogue partnership throughout common initiatives and projects. We are particularly proud and honored to chair the Italy-IORA committee of the Italy that play an important role. The Italy-IORA platform operated by the focal point that is Mr. Neri. I wish definitely to pay a tribute to the chair of the Luigi Giannini, that is the president of the Federpesca, that is an extremely important association participating to our Federazione del Mare, and to the Secretary General of Federazione del Mare, that is Laurence Martin, They are coordinating with passion and dedication a network of public and private stakeholders, Italian excellencies on the blue economy within that committee, and are working for concrete and operational cooperation on the blue economy between Italy and IORA to increase Italy's involvement in a region where the challenges related to sustainability and to sustainable development and maritime safety are extremely significant. And I wish to stress that all the association and all the companies that are part of this important world of the blue economy are really paying a tribute to the sustainability since years. Under the leadership of the Federazione del Mare, other important clusters like the Assoitica, the Cluster Big, and Confitarma, and the CNR, that is an important research center in Italy, have joined force together. Many others have joined force together in that committee, and all together their participations along with the lines covered by the IORA Blue Economy priority pillars. Priority pillars is fisheries and aquaculture, renewable ocean energies, seaport and shippings, offshore hydrocarbons and seabed minerals, marine biotechnology, research, and tourism to promote cruise tourism in the Indian Ocean regions and to promote sustainable management and development of coastal and marine tourism sector. Since then, some significant initiatives have taken place and projects have been carried out, mainly on sustainable cruise tourism and fishery sector. These initiatives and projects will be further illustrated furthermore. Let me, however, briefly stress that for Italy, as a founder member of the EU, the marine resource protection has been a key objective on the EU environmental policy since before the launch of the European Green Deal. Since 2019, the European Green Deal calls for a transformation of our economy to become a modern, resource-efficient, and competitive economy where zero net emission of greenhouse gases are phased out by 2050 and the EU's natural capital is protected. This is a global challenge that the whole planet has to address. In that context, as was underlined by Mr. Neri, Italy as G20 presidency and co-chair of COP26 with the UK is eager to contribute in making the transition from blue growth to a sustainable blue economy, and this must become true. However, as stated in B20 policy papers, the recommendations that will be submitted to the G20 summit later this month in Rome, all the countries are not on the same level playing field when addressing these challenging and adequate adapted partnership have to be built, adapted to cope with the three targets of decarbonization, digitalization, and resilience. Diplomats transforming the EU blue economy for a sustainable future does not presage a list of new regulatory requirements or mandatory measures. Instead, it largely looks at how other proposals under European Green Deal tie into the marine resources protection objective, as well as emphasizing the need for investment and research. Increasing renewable energy production by a mix of wind, thermal, wave, and tidal energy, as detailed in the EU strategy on offshore renewable strategy. Decarbonizing marine infrastructure, such as ports and maritime transport. This has been discussed in the EU Sustainability and Smart Mobility Strategy. Reducing the ocean pollution, particularly via single-use and microplastic, and via circularity, introducing a new virgin materials into the economy as possible, preserving and restoring coastal ecosystem to increase blue carbon capture, responsible food system, which will include new legislative proposal for aquaculture and fisheries and new sustainable seafood marketing standards, review of maritime spatial planning routes, including a review of EU directive on maritime spatial planning, initiative to channel capital towards the sustainability of blue economy, including public finance, and support the United Nations Environmental Finance Program initiative, voluntary sustainable blue economy financial initiative. So there is a lot to do on the tables, and there is a lot to do for our association. Concluding my speech, thanking for the attention, we need to promote a sustainable blue economy for the European Union. We cannot stop at our borders. Many blue economy value chains are global and exposed to global competition. And EU and Italian operations do business all over the world. Our responsibility, therefore, lies not only in defending the EU market from unsustainable products and practices, but also in ensuring a level playing field for EU business in the global marketplace and in promoting the EU's expertise, environmental action, and rule of law. In line with the International Ocean Governance Agenda adopted in 2016 and with the legal framework established by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, Italy will continue supporting within the European Union the condition for a sustainable blue economy internationally. Therefore, a proactive structured dialogue with IORA is paramount on blue economy and has to be further strengthened to ensure that the decarbonization, digitalization, and resilience challenges are addressed adequately globally. Together with the national IORA focal point, Mr. Giampaolo Neri, let's continue our mission. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for your introductory remarks, Mr. Mattioli. Allow me now to give the floor to the Acting Secretary General of IORA, Gatot Gunawan. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Neri. Can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Thank you, Excellencies. Very good morning. Thank you for the invitation. This is my third time I joined the Festival della Diplomazia, and thank you to be around you again. And the blue economy is gaining increasing importance globally with the wide range of opportunities that it's offered that can contribute to boosting economic development and growth. However, ocean resources are not infinite and being exploited at the significantly high rate. Which impact on the marine environment, several mechanisms are now being considered to ensure the environmental sustainability of the blue economy. For example, various countries are adopting ecosystem-based management approach as a tool that takes into consideration the complex ecological and socio-economic environment in which marine organisms live. This management system ensures a balance between ecological well-being with human and social well-being. The aim of such approach is therefore to maintain ecosystem in healthy, productive, and resilient condition in order to provide services according to human wants and needs. Apart from overexploitation of ocean resources, the impact of climate change are putting increasing pressure on both marine and terrestrial environment through more extreme weather conditions that also increase the likelihood of natural disaster. Climate change is predicted to result in the increase in global temperature, sea level rise, ocean acidification, more intense tropical cyclone, and increase in frequency, intensity, or duration of extreme weather events. It is predicted that climate change-driven disturbance will have a negative effect on water supply, food security, health, industry, settlement, and society, especially for those located in coastal areas and river floodplains. In addition, climate change would also impact on natural system and resources, infrastructure, and labor productivity, which may lead to reduced economic growth and increasing poverty and inequality. Climate change will affect all countries in the world, but poor countries and poor people are at higher risk. For example, agricultural yield in some African countries is expected to reduce by as 50% by 2022. Asia will be facing freshwater availability issues by 2022, and its coastal region would be more prone to increased flooding as a result of the sea level rise and river flooding. By 2050, coastal region in Australia are also projected to be threatened by the impact of the sea level rise and increased severity and frequency of storm and coastal flooding. Small island developing states are more vulnerable to climate change-driven disturbance, with millions of people who could be affected by natural hazards such as flooding, storm surge, erosion, and other coastal hazards. It is also expected that climate change will reduce already low income and increase the frequency of illness and death rates in many developing countries. Therefore, there is a need for international assistance to these developing countries for implementation of climate change adaptation measures. These have already been recognized and acknowledged by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Disaster normally result from the combination of an exposed, vulnerable, and unprepared community towards hazards. Disaster risks are affected by climate change through increased frequency, intensity, and duration of weather and climate hazard, as well as through the vulnerability of communities caused by the degradation of ecosystem and decrease in the availability and accessibility of water and food. Disaster risk reduction, therefore, would focus on addressing the risks related to all categories of hazards, including geophysical hazards. Therefore, adaptation measures to the present and predicted climate stimuli or effect through, for example, disaster risk assessment, protection of environment, development of early warning system, sustainable and safe building settlement, among others, are prerequisite to the increasing the resilience of communities to all hazards. In addition, there is also a need for better disaster risk reduction measure and action that would assist analyzing and managing causes of disaster, which would improve preparedness for adverse events, reduce vulnerability of people and assets, improve land and environment management, among others. The Indian Ocean countries contains a disproportionate amount of the world's blue carbon ecosystem, and the nations of the Indian Ocean are well positioned to be global leaders in blue carbon protection and restoration. However, pressure associated with coastal development have degraded this blue carbon ecosystem and eroded the natural capital that this ecosystem provides. Some of the highest rates of the degradation occur in Indian Ocean. Owing the high importance of this sector, Australia hosted the Indian Ocean Conference on Blue Carbon on 19 to 23 March 2018 in Perth. As follow-up of this initiative, Madagascar organized a workshop on improving knowledge of research on blue carbon in Western Indian Ocean, focused on seagrass and mangroves ecosystem. In addition, in September 2019, Australia Foreign Minister announced the IORA Indian Ocean Blue Carbon Hub at the 3rd IORA Blue Economic Ministerial Conference in Dhaka, Bangladesh. The hub aims to build knowledge and capacity to protect and restore blue carbon ecosystem through the Indian Ocean in a way that enhances livelihood, reduces risk from coastal hazard, and helps mitigate climate change. Island nations such as Maldives, Mauritius, and the Seychelles are part of the IORA and must be top priority of the organization. These island states are extremely vulnerable to impending change and need to be provided support to mitigate the effect of climate change. Southeast Asian nations such as Thailand and Indonesia, also part of IORA, suffered the maximal damage during 2004 tsunami and continue to remain among the nations most prone to flooding. The IORA must collectively develop a framework along with other necessary contingency plans for the region to handle any major environmental disaster in the near future. The Indian Ocean region also remains a biodiversity hotspot, one that is home to several million species of flora and fauna. Increased pollution level combined with overfishing pose a major threat to the rainforests, marine reefs, and other ecosystems in the region. The environmental threats also have significant implication for the fishing community. Millions of field folk depend on the natural resources of the region for their livelihood, which is at stake in the current situation. As conclusion, I would like to encourage Italy to work with IORA on this issue of the climate change. And I'm looking forward to the further discussion on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gunawan. And surely Italy is ready to advance and strengthen our cooperation also on the issue of climate change. I now give the floor to Gramenos Mastroieni, Deputy Secretary General of the Union for the Mediterranean. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, Excellencies. Good morning, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank Italy for having brokered this starting cooperation between UFM and IORA. There is a lot we can do together, and it is all about the scalability of common solutions. The Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean, in face of climate change, have a lot of commonalities. These are two climate change impacts hotspots. And this makes them not only two separate regional stakes, but because of possible chain consequences, a global stake. Let us see, there are some surface commonalities. For instance, we both have an important problem of salinization. In the Mediterranean, the sea level rise is forecasted to be very quick, 1 meter before the end of the century, but even 20 centimeters before 15 years. 20 centimeters do not scare people, but it might mean the salinization of the delta of the Nile, jeopardizing the sustainability of a large economy. We both share the forecast of more severe events. In the Mediterranean, we are unfortunately forecasting 250 million people in water scarcity within a relatively small period of time. But if we only stop to considering that there are similar impacts in the two regions, we do not really get the broad pictures. What these two regions have in common is some sort of impact that the media never talk about, but which is actually the most important and the most threatening, which is desynchronization of natural mechanisms. What's happening in our two regions? A more energetic climate becomes chaotic. Climatic patterns do not obey to the forecasted cycles. And this has two kinds of impacts. One on nature. We must not forget that whatever fight we lead for nature, it has one core value, which is biodiversity. When we fight against pollution, when we fight against the depletion of the ozone layer, when we fight against acid rains, actually what we have in mind is biodiversity, because although we tend to consider ourselves above nature, we actually still depend very much on its services. So the fact that climate acting as a clockwork that synchronizes nature is more and more deregulated, randomized in our regions, makes it so that the end result is a very quick demise of all those biodiversity services which are essential for our economies. Let me give you a very easy example. Things happen at the same time in nature, not by chance. It is not by chance that animals have their puppies at the same time in which plants have their fruits. But imagine a delayed spring. Fruits will arrive later, but not for that mother bear or mother tiger will be in the condition of delaying the bearing of her puppy. So this is a simple example, but it gives you an idea of how both the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean are risking an accelerating trend of demise of the whole ecosystem services that are very important for mankind. And even mankind is very exposed to this deregulation of climate patterns. Why? Because we organize the whole of our economy, societies, and civilizations based on the predictability of climate and natural cycles. If you don't know anymore when rain will come. You don't know when you can start cultivating your fields. And it is not only something that concerns poor rural areas. If you're the manager of water distribution of an important cities and you don't have the slightest idea of when there will be snowfall in the mountains, you will not be able to manage water distribution. So this, which is the untold story, dramatic story of our two regions, unites us. And there is another aspect of fragility that unites our regions, which is an important asymmetry in resources. In the Mediterranean, we have a situation in which some actors are very strong and some actors are not at all. It can be described, for instance, by quoting the trends of international exchanges. In our region, of all international exchanges, 90% takes place among North Stream states, 9% among North and South Stream states, and only 1% among South Stream states. And this is important because in terms of adapting and preserving a certain stability, it makes the whole region fragile. So since we have so much in common, the idea is that we can put in common also a lot of solutions. And let me describe what is the approach that we take in the Mediterranean that becomes objectively more functional if it's extended to other regions in a community. Our reasoning here in the Mediterranean is that not one single state, not even the strongest, have enough resources to face the pace and width of the change that we are going to lead with. What do we need? We need to put resources together. For instance, in energy, the European Union is aiming at carbon neutrality of 2050. Let me squarely state that this is impossible without the solar potential of the South Stream. This brings to necessary interconnection of the markets and of the infrastructures, and it has one more benefit, that is that the two economies will be rebalanced. There is a market for the potential of the South, there is an input for the needs of the North, but this distributes income and so diminishes this asymmetry, which is very, very dangerous. But there is another community of resources that we need to start immediately. And I'm looking, and this is my final remark, at the upcoming COP. One chapter, which is somehow a source of tensions, and it is not too considered, is technology transfer. Technology transfer, unfortunately, suffers of a lot of misunderstandings because it is mainly understood as a gift of knowledge from some rich and advanced communities to other which should be poor and less advanced, something like that. Well, let's take a look at what happens in our region. In roughly 15 years, the southern rim of the Mediterranean will have the same climate as the climate that used to be the normal one on the south rim of the Mediterranean. Southern Europe will have the same climate as North Africa. So what about technology? We have to understand that in the south rim of the Mediterranean, they have 6,000 years of technology in managing drylands. For instance, if you go along the Silk Road, you can find buildings cone-shaped, which are called the yachal. They were used by merchants to store perishable goods. In those buildings, without the expenditure of a single vat, you have a constant temperature between 0 and -4. And I could spend the whole day quoting technologies like that. So our idea is that we have to put everything in common, resources, but above all, knowledge, and that there is no technology transfer. There is a need for a huge global common sharing of solutions. It will work within the Mediterranean, but it should work even more if IORA states, with all their knowledge, it's the siege of civilizations that are so rich, so advanced. If we put together all our knowledges. And this is why I am really confident that our cooperation will become strategic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And for sure, Italy will do whatever it can. It will play its role in facilitating contact between the Union for the Mediterranean and IORA. We hope that even today's event can contribute to further consolidate such dialogue.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now give the floor to Paolo Glisenti, Commissioner for Italy at Expo 2020 Dubai. You have the floor, sir. If you can.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. I'm talking to you from the first global event after the pandemic, and all the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean countries are participating here at this expo. So it's ideal moment for discussing and sharing experiences on the many issues that you have very well described. I'm talking to you from the Italian Pavilion, which has been built with the three very big hulls on top as a roof of the pavilion, done by Fincantieri, indicating I'm sorry, can you hear me? Yes. Indicating the history, the maritime history and vision of Italy, always sailing through the seas to the Mediterranean to discover new lands, new populations, new civilizations. So that's the identity that we wanted to bring to Expo for the memory of Italy sailing, but also the future of Italy permanently in discovering and finding of new solutions and new relationship and so forth. So this is really an ideal pavilion to talk and discuss Mediterranean, Indian Ocean issues that of common interest and have become common challenges. Also, I want to tell you that the pavilion has facades done with ropes that were produced by recycling 2.5 million bottles of plastic bottles from the Mediterranean. Just also to show that our intention here is to discuss sustainability by demonstrating what can be done. I was struck the other day by one of our volunteers that went to Milano for the youth summit, the pre-COP 26 youth summit. She came back and she posted on her social media. I thought when I was in Milano, I thought I would agree with Greta about the blah, blah, blah approach to these climate change issues. Then I came back to this pavilion and to Expo, and I can tell you these are facts, and it's not blah, blah, blah. So I'm telling you this because we are here to demonstrate and discuss actual solutions, factual solutions to many of the issues that you are discussing and we have been discussing for the first 3 weeks of Expo. The first 3 weeks of Expo have been dedicated to climate change, and there were a lot of common challenges, common thoughts between the Mediterranean rim countries and the ocean rim countries in the Indian Ocean rim countries about how to tackle climate change together. And you have been, the speakers that have preceded me have been saying this very precisely, very clearly. The second issue that was discussed at Expo so far was sustainable agriculture. And this also is part of a common ground of discussion, especially in the sense of experiencing and realizing pilot projects for new agriculture in deserted lands, arid lands, or where there is bad water for plants. And this is really part of the action plan here at Expo for discussion. And finally, we are now in the Space Week. And of course, as you can imagine, Space Week is something that involves both rims very directly and very, very importantly. But let me also tell you that there is an holistic side of this discussion, which we want to take forward with our Mediterranean and Indian friends and partners. And the holistic approach regards more humanistic issues, if I may call them like this, like women empowerment in our respective countries, like education for new skills, like social issues that pertain both to the Mediterranean Rim and the Indian Ocean Rim. We have students from Indian Ocean countries in our pavilion and from Mediterranean countries in our pavilion every day, discussing with their respective teachers at the university level, high school level, post-university level, issues that pertain to the new skills that have to be brought to the teaching platforms in our respective countries to enable the young generation living in the ocean rim countries, in the Indian Ocean Rim countries and the Mediterranean Rim countries, to really be actors of the new labor markets, the new innovation systems, the new productive sectors of the world. And this is an holistic approach which is gaining ground alongside the more sectorial, more technology-driven, more scientific-driven issues that you have indicating, which I want to point out today because I think it's part of the discussion we intend to take forward during the next 6 months. And I want to close by restating our proposal, which we made a few months ago, to hold the first Indian Ocean countries and Mediterranean countries meeting, high-level meeting in Dubai at Expo, in the last week of Expo, which is dedicated to water. And we'd be happy to host in our pavilion a high-level diplomatic meeting to come up with the conclusions of the 6 months of work that we're doing here, and I look forward to the perspective of new actions plans that can be shared and taken forward together. So we would be happy if you agree, under the auspices of Festival della Diplomazia and the patronage of Festival della Diplomazia, to hold in the Italian pavilion at the end of March, which is the Water Week of Expo, the last week of Expo, Water Week, to have a high-level diplomatic meeting between the two rims countries. That would be, I think, a very interesting conclusion of this 6 months journey through many issues that pertain closely to both interests of our Indian friends, Indian Ocean friends, and our Mediterranean countries. So thank you very much for this opportunity you give me. And I just wanted to give you a sense of what is happening now in Dubai at Expo, in the first global meeting after the pandemic, to show that what you are facing and discussing every day at your high level of responsibilities is here as a common ground of actions plan that are going part of the discussion and exchange of experiences. Thank you very much for inviting me here.
Thank you very much for sharing your insights and for putting forward this extremely interesting proposal for the Water Week in Dubai. We will surely start working on that immediately, I would say. Thank you very much. We now move to the section of our meeting where we will discuss sharing best practices on similar challenges in water, environment, and the blue economy in terms of sustainable access. I will give the floor first to His Excellency Ambassador Shamim Ahsan, Ambassador of Bangladesh to Italy, who represents also the incoming IORA presidency. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Excellencies, representatives of IORA member states accredited to Italy, Minister Luca Sabatiusi, Director General for Global Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, the Italian Republic, Dr. Gato Hari Gunawan, Acting Secretary General, Indian Ocean Rim Association, IORA, Mr. Graminas Mastrozeni, Deputy Secretary General, Union for the Mediterranean, Mr. Giorgio Bartolomeucci, Secretary General of the Festival della Diplomazia. Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are. At the outset, I would like to thank sincerely Diplomacy Festival, the organizer, for hosting this webinar on a very important topic, the challenge of
we don't hear you anymore, Ambassador. It seems
members. Bangladesh is the current Vice Chair of IORA and will be a COM meeting on 17 November 2021 for next 2 years. Bangladesh has invited member states and dialogue partners for participation at the Council of Ministers and its preceding meetings. Bangladesh is one of the worst affected countries by the impacts of global climate change. Climate change poses an existential threat to our 165 million people. Although we have hardly contributed to the deterioration of the environment, just 1 degree centigrade increase of global temperature and further sea level rise will result in inundation of a large area of Bangladesh and thus displacement of 40 million people by the end of this century. In addition to all this, we have been hosting 1.1 million Rohingyas forcibly displaced from the neighboring Myanmar, which is also impacting our environment severely. In tackling climate change, Bangladesh, under the dynamic leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, has taken a number of initiatives, essentially from its own resources, and turning the country as a role model globally in adaptation measures. The Indian Ocean is very important for international trade routes and transport, which is also home to over 2.5 billion people. For prosperity and sustainable development of the people of the region, we need a stable and secure Indian Ocean. Bangladesh believes that only concerted efforts and partnerships of the countries of the Indian Ocean rim will be able to ensure a peaceful, stable, and secure Indian Ocean region. It is equally important that we also explore possibilities to share experiences and collaborate with the Mediterranean countries in common projects. Bangladesh deeply appreciates Italy for being a proactive and supportive partner to IORA since becoming the dialogue partner in 2019. It has launched a vibrant online Italy-IORA platform to exhibit its dedication and active participation in IORA. This is very commendable that Italy is actively participating in the IORA's priority areas, particularly focusing on the blue economy and fisheries management through the hosting of several virtual engagements and programs. We note with deep appreciation that Italy has shown its willingness to support and develop initiatives in the blue economy together with IORA partners. The blue economy is one of the priority areas of Bangladesh. Under the visionary leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh earned a huge maritime area of over 100,000 square kilometers after successful maritime boundary delimitation with our neighboring countries. Therefore, the blue economy is now one of the cornerstones for Bangladesh's economic growth and socio-economic development. In this regard, Bangladesh successfully organized the first International Blue Economy Workshop in 2014, second International Blue Economy Dialogue in November 2017, and third IORA Blue Economy Ministerial Conference in September 2019. A work plan for development of blue economy has been prepared as a guideline to tap the blue economy potentials. During the bilateral talks between the Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina, and the then Honorable President of the Council of Ministers, Prime Minister of the Italian Republic, His Excellency Mr. Giuseppe Conte, on February 5, 2020 in Rome, the sector of blue economy was also indicated as an area of interest, also in connection with Italy's outreach activities towards the IORA. Bangladesh and Italy can build partnerships inter alia on technology transfer and renewable energy, shipbuilding and capacity building in the sectors of aquaculture and biotechnology. As Bangladesh is going to take charge of chairmanship of the IORA at the end of this year, we remain determined to work as a responsible member states with a view to achieving the goal of the association and in a strengthening cooperation and relationship among the member states and dialogue partners. During its chairmanship, Bangladesh will remain engaged in promoting all the priority areas and cross-cutting issues for sustainable prosperity, peace, and development in the region, with a special focus on maritime safety and security, fisheries management, trade and investment, and of course, blue economy. I look forward to meeting you, all of you, physically when the COVID situation permits. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your remarks. And we now have pre-recorded message from the director of the International Center for Climate Change and Development in Dhaka, who could not be connected live with us. And before that, I just would like to tell you that after that, and before moving on, we will maybe have a couple of intervention from the ambassadors which are here with us. I understand that His Excellency Carmel Vassallo and His Excellency Thomas Kunsteli, so from Malta and Italy, would like to intervene. I will give you the floor if it's okay for you after the video message from Professor Huck. Thank you very much. We can go with the video message then.
Good morning. My name is Salimul Haq. I'm the director of the International Center for Climate Change and Development at the Independent University Bangladesh, based in Dhaka, Bangladesh. I'm very grateful for inviting me to speak at this very important event on blue economy and climate change. As many of you may be aware, Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable countries to the impacts of climate change because we sit on the delta of two of the world's biggest rivers, the Ganges and the Brahmaputra. And also we have a large coastline in the Bay of Bengal, part of the Indian Ocean, which is regularly visited by cyclones that have in past decades killed hundreds of thousands of people, but no longer kill so many people because we have one of the best cyclone preparedness and evacuation systems in the world. We can regularly warn and evacuate 3 million people so that their lives are no longer lost by cyclones, but still cyclones cause a lot of damage, and so do flooding from the major rivers. So even though we are a very vulnerable country with 170 million people or so living in 150,000 square kilometers, very densely populated, relatively poor country, although we are making progress on the economic development front. We are hoping to graduate from least developed status to middle income status within the next decade. And people are making progress, particularly in education and particularly in girls' education in Bangladesh, with our development emphasis on educating young people, particularly young girls, for the future. So Bangladesh, I would say, is a relative success story in terms of its development pathway and now in terms of tackling this new global problem of climate change, which is affecting all countries, including in Europe and even in America and the rich countries. And the Bay of Bengal is one of the key regions of the world, oceanic and sea regions of the world, that are going to be affected by both sea level rise as well as by the impacts of higher, more intense cyclones coming and hitting. For example, in May of 2020, we got hit by a super cyclone Amphan, which became a super cyclone because of the elevated sea surface temperature in the Bay of Bengal over 2 degrees higher than normal, which made it into a super cyclone, which hit the West Bengal state in India, Calcutta, and then Bangladesh. But fortunately, because of our very sophisticated and very effective early warning system, we managed to get 3 million people to shelters in time. The death rate, which in previous decades had been in the hundreds of thousands of people dying, this time was only a few dozen, and they were mainly fishermen who were out at sea and didn't get the warnings in time. 3 million people on land successfully evacuated and survived. But nevertheless, there was a lot of damage. Many people couldn't go home. Their homes were destroyed. The land was salinized by seawater. And so the loss and damage from climate change is a growing phenomena that Bangladesh is being affected by, and other countries are also being affected by as well. And we will all have to face together. So in the global diplomacy, climate change diplomacy now, particularly for littoral countries by the sea, is an issue that we all need to be joining forces, learning from each other and sharing with each other going forward. And I'm sure Bangladesh will play its part in the international community as it has done in the past. Thank you very much.
Very well. Allow me now to give the floor to His Excellency Carmel Vassallo, Ambassador of Malta to Italy. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neri. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for imposing on you that I speak now. I thought it will only take 1 or 2 minutes, my intervention, but I sincerely have to leave because of another commitment. Good morning to all, and I'd like also to thank Diplomacy Festival for putting this initiative together. My short intervention makes reference to a recent article I read in a very influential weekly magazine about climate change and the challenges that we face, which actually said climate change affects everything from geopolitics to economics to migration. It went on to say it also shapes cities, life expectancies, and even wine lists. Now, the thing is that how are we going to lessen the future impacts that this climate change phenomenon is bringing to the whole world? What are we doing to ensure that countries which will be mostly affected, and my country is a very small island state which will be heavily affected and is being affected by climate change, what are we doing to help these countries? My issue here is initiatives, which are good initiatives that are being taken at the national or regional levels, like the IORA initiatives, for example. How are these impacting or other regions? Or worse still, how are other regions or other countries whose first interest is still their national interest, their national development, will the efforts being taken by countries in the region like IORA, for example, be neutralized because other countries are looking at other interests rather than making a whole global effort towards these climate change and the challenges that is being put on us? What will happen in the future if, according to the forecast that we have regarding the rise in climate change in global temperatures, the sea level will go up in the Mediterranean. If it goes up by 20%, it's already affecting Bangladesh, as we are already hearing. If it goes up by 1 meter, it will not just be Bangladesh. There will be several other countries, especially island states, and especially coastal countries in the Mediterranean, who will be gravely affected. What are we going to do to keep these problems at bay? Or at least, how are we going to do to also start adapting ourselves to living with these challenges? And what are we going to do on a global stage to stop this phenomenon? And this will obviously lay more and more responsibilities on world leaders when they will meet in Glasgow very soon for the COP26, that they must look at the problem as a global problem, not a problem that is affecting one nation, one country, one island state, but how it is affecting the whole world. And in this sense, I would like to congratulate Italy for the efforts that it has already been doing in the G20 forum. And I would also urge, if I may, Italy, that it will retain and maintain the momentum it has already reached in order to make all countries of the world listen to what we are saying, listen to what our youths are saying about their future. We are responsible for those who are coming after us. This is our responsibility. With this, I thank you, Mr. Neri, and I augur that from this fruitful, from this conversation we are having today, there would be some fruitful conclusions and recommendations to make. Thank you to all.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And surely we will try to keep the momentum even after the G20 presidency. And now give the floor to, to Ambassador, His Excellency Tomac Kunsteli, Ambassador of Slovenia to Italy. Please, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for having the opportunity to be a part of this traditional Festival della Diplomazia. Dear colleagues and friends, let me speak also from the perspective of Slovenia and from the most northern part of the Adriatic Sea, and also as the EU presidency. Recent IPCC climate report from 9th of August, a code red for humanity, as stated by UN Secretary General, is warning of increasingly extreme heat waves, droughts and flooding, and a key temperature limit 1.5 degrees being broken in just over a decade. Scientific reports predict for Mediterranean 20% faster warming than the global average. Climate impacts will exert additional pressure on already strained ecosystems, vulnerable economies and societies as followed. Droughts and fires are a common consequence. Coastal zones face heightened disaster risk, including flooding and erosion, and the salinization of river deltas and aquifers that sustain food security and livelihoods. By 2050, water demand in the Mediterranean region is projected to double or even triple. Adriatic sea level rising is faster than the level of any other sea in the last 2 decades. The local population alongside our coast has been experiencing increased flooding of the coastal urban area. According to experts, this phenomena is attributable to both global sea level rise and weather conditions in the region. Species that have not previously been observed in these latitudes have become common. In the Adriatic, the negative consequences of climate change are particularly evident in coastal wetlands. Projections show that due to rising sea levels in the Adriatic, shifts road and railway infrastructure and the evacuation of some parts of coastal settlements will be necessary in the future. Unpredictable effect of extreme climate events on supply routes in Asia and Northern Europe, geographical constraints of ports such as Hamburg and Rotterdam, especially during recent floods, are affecting existing supply chains and leading to a growing demand for new transport routes, creating new opportunities for Mediterranean and especially North Adriatic ports. Due to climate change, companies are introducing green technologies and choosing partners that also follow green and low carbon trends. Therefore, Adriatic ports will have to strive for a green and digital transition and the development of environmentally friendly hinterland infrastructure. Let me say a couple of words about global action blueprints and Paris Climate Agreement. Our countries must work together to forge a new international consensus on climate-conscious future. Slovenia EU presidency had in the run-up and during COP26 will do its utmost to contribute to the success of COP26 in Glasgow. As climate change and biodiversity are interlinked, our presidency works for more ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework to be adopted at the 15th meeting of Conference of Parties Convention on Biological Diversity in China. If we go to Fit for 55 and the European Union, Our key priorities are legislative package Fit for 55, COP26 on climate change, and COP15 on biological diversity. In negotiations on the package Fit for 55, we want to ensure balanced and coherent discussions so that each member state's concerns will be heard. We should divide burden fairly and cost effectively, leaving no one behind. Member states' right to choose their energy mix and technologies must be respected. To make European infrastructure more resilient, integrated, and green, we devote special attention on key EU dossiers, such as the Trans-European Networks for Energy, Single European Sky 2+,
Your Excellency, apparently we blacked out. Okay, I believe that we have some technical problem with the intervention of Ambassador Kunsteli. I believe we can move on and then see if we can then bring him back to the fold. I don't know if there are any other interventions from our guests from the other embassies which are with us today, and if not, I would move on and give the floor to Davide Triacca, Sustainability Director of Costa Crociere. You have the floor. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Your Excellencies, it's a pleasure to be here. And let me start from the topic of this year convention, the festival of this year, the Ready for the Unexpected. I will start, if you allow me, from an anecdote. In my role as Sustainability Director, I have the responsibility, the accountability to design the strategy of the company for the next 5 to 10 years in terms of sustainability and reducing the impact. And in doing so, we discussed, we interviewed a lot of sustainability leaders from other industries to see what their vision is for the next 5 to 10 years. And guess what? Let's say the most recurrent issue that they raised in terms of risk assessment was the fact that we have to deal with the unpredictable. Managing the unexpected is the highest challenges, that the biggest challenges that every company has to deal with for the foreseeable future. Of course, my intervention has not the ambition of providing you an answer to such a huge question, but I will only humbly try to provide you an overview of Costa sustainability approach. In doing so, allow me to share a brief presentation and some videos. I'll try to be brief and stay within the time you allow me. You should be seeing my screen. Okay, so let me first briefly introduce what Costa Group is. We are the largest European cruise operator. We actually operate 24 ships with 2 new builds coming into our fleet by end of this year. And we operate under 2 brands, Costa, which is essentially an international brand, and AIDA, which is our German branch. The impact of Costa Group in Europe is huge. We contributed to create over 63,000 jobs only in Europe, not considering the more or less the same number that we have in the other parts of the world, mostly in the Indian Ocean region. And we generate an economic impact of 12 billion euros per year in Europe with more than 10,000 suppliers. Of course, today we are talking about sustainability, and at Costa, we see sustainability as a journey. We see that as a journey because it connects 2 generations, ours and the next one. And we see that as a journey because, as every journey, it has to do with limits and choices. Limits because I would be very happy to be here with you, sharing the fact that we are about to launch a new ship, which is, I don't know, powered by wind, and which is able to source its food by, on board. But that technology does not exist. In fact, human technology is limited, as we all know. And choices comes into play every time we deal with limits. And Costa made the choice of allocating a significant portion of its revenues, of its resources, to lead the journey toward being more sustainable for the whole cruise industry, for being more sustainable. Okay, but of course, sustainability means not being theoretical, but means being very practical. And our sustainability leadership is based on 3 pillars. The first one is, of course, technology. Back in 2019, we introduced in the cruise sector disruptive technology. We were the first operator in the world to launch and operate a liquefied natural gas ship, which means running with the most advanced propulsion technology currently available for the maritime sector, and allowing the best environmental performances. I put together a video showing you what it means in terms of impact I mentioned the race toward the zero emission ship, which as a group we are leading globally, and which is absorbing a significant portion of our resources now in terms of both ideas and financial resources. And 2 very significant milestones will be launched next year, with the largest lithium battery pack installed on a cruise ship by end of next year, and still by end of next year, a large commercial size fuel cell installed on board of our ships. These are 2 very significant milestones in our path toward what we see before 2030 as the first net zero emission ship. So technology, of course, is the first pillar, and then we have food. Being a cruise company, of course, we provide excellent culinary experiences to our guests, but we see and we acknowledge, we recognize the value of food 360 degrees, because, of course, talking about food is talking about sustainability. The paradigm is simple and unacceptable. While globally, about one third of the food we produce globally is wasted. Between 700 and 800 million people does not have enough food to feed themselves. By the way, food waste and methane emission generated by food waste contribute to between 7 and 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So this is not acceptable. We intervene on that, and with a 360-degree approach, we started from the recipes on board. We reconceived them totally. We started, we're starting from scratches, and we encourage seasonality, proximity, and the nutritional value of what we provide to our guests. Of course, we focused, as I said, a lot in reducing overproduction and waste, and involving both our chefs on board, our galleys, our crew, and our guests. We see our guests as a fundamental stakeholder for all the initiatives that we put in place. The results were outstanding. In less than 5 years, we managed to reduce by 35% food waste, and we donated with local communities in need all the remaining overproduction of food, totaling more than 180,000 meals portion donated to people in need. This is a huge number that, if we put together the effort of Costa Crociere Foundation, I will come to that in a moment, means that Costa overall donated 1 million meals to people in need. But again, I will come to that in a second. So we mentioned technology, we mentioned food, and the third pillar of our sustainability strategy is based on the growth and well-being of the local communities that we meet during our journey, that we meet in our destination. A very short video will introduce this principle. So Mr. Ghilisenti and other gentlemen were with us this July when we launched this manifesto, which is first and unique for now within the framework of the cruise industry. And it is very simple. It states the vision of Costa in relation to the willingness and the capability of creating value for the destination we meet. I see here important representative from a fundamental area of the world, the Pacific, and we are working together with destination, and will be increasingly working with the destinations we meet to try leverage on the asset of the company, of the group, to make to grow together with the local community. We see our destination not merely as places, but we see destination as group of people with their tradition, identity. We see them as a community, and we want to protect and promote them. This is our role, to say, let's say, on the good side of travel. Last but not least, we have a foundation. I have the honor of being of leading the foundation action too, in my role as with the sustainability, and the foundation made an outstanding impact. 29 social and environmental projects in 5 years for the benefit of more than 56,000 people in 4 continents from 130 different nationalities. This is again the role that we see for a leader in that journey to build a better future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for these very interesting insights on sustainable cruising. I see that Ambassador Kunsteli is back, and wondering if he wants to maybe conclude his intervention. You have the floor.
Sorry. Thank you. Sorry again for having communication problems. Anyways, I would like just to conclude. I was speaking about Fit for 55. I was talking about European infrastructure to be more resilient, integrated, and green. And as EU devoted special attention on key dossiers such as Trans-European Networks for Energy, Single European Sky, 2+, and Trans-European Transport Network. Greening is the common theme of all goals, also in agriculture, fisheries, and forestry, be it organic farming, reform of common agricultural policy, long-term vision for rural areas, UN World Summit on Food Systems, and the expected Commission's communication on carbon farming, etc. Coming to the last point, I would like to stress the importance and the value of pre-COP26, which took place in Milano a couple of days ago. More than 50 representatives of the parties to the Paris Agreement met in Milan between 30th of September and 2nd of October, most at ministerial level, including Slovenia and EU Commission, in the presence of the UN Deputy Secretary General, the UNFCCC Executive Secretary, and the SBI and SBSTA chairs. Other EU member states representatives present were from Germany, Denmark, France, Sweden, Poland, and of course, Italy. The meeting was held in person, while some representatives participated virtually from India and China. The discussions were structured as continuation from the London ministerial consultations in July and were divided into core topics: maintaining the 1.5 degrees goal, adaptation and the impacts of loss and damage, completing the PA rule book, Article 6, transparency, common timeframes, and mobilizing finances. Discussions were mostly held in smaller breakout groups with reporting back at the plenary sessions each day. The UK COP presidency is setting high expectations for both the political and negotiated outcomes for COP26, aimed primarily at putting additional pressure on those G20 countries that have not yet enhanced their NDCs and on the developed countries that promised collectively to mobilize $100 billion annually between 2020 and 2025. The UK is also seeking outcomes from the COP and that could reassure vulnerable developing countries that there will be international support for preparing for and responding to the impacts of climate change. The COP presidency has asked pairs of ministers to begin working on roadmaps and delivery plans on these goals. At the beginning of the pre-COP, there was a ministerial roundtable where youth presented the outcomes at Y4C event. The youth called for accelerated and urgent climate action in different sectors and areas, such as energy transition and green jobs, adaptation and resilience, nature-based solutions, finance flows, tourism, education, capacity building and funding, abolishment of fossil fuels. They also requested countries to ensure meaningful youth engagement and involvement in all decision-making processes in the field of climate change and climate policy planning. Dear colleagues and friends, this was just my short contribution to see that EU is taking very seriously the importance of climate change and all the consequences which take place in the Mediterranean and of course also globally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, also for bringing in also the remarks of the European Union presidency. And now I would like to give the floor to Luca Franza, as head of European Union Institutional Affairs of Edison.
Thank you, Mr. Neri. Thank you, Mr. Neri, and good morning or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen and excellencies. I have the pleasure to represent today Edison at this very timely webinar. Edison is one of the largest energy players in Italy, particularly large in wind production, hydropower, gas, and energy efficiency. We have embarked long ago on the sustainability journey as it has been defined by Mr. Triacca, and we are committed to contribute to increasingly ambitious climate targets. Ambassador Costel has just mentioned Fit for 55. We are very busy with that here in Brussels. Very ambitious targets, minus 55% greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, in order to achieve the objective of climate neutrality in 2050. We salute these objectives, and we are of course, busy drafting plans in order to give a very strong contribution to these increased ambitions. Also at Edison, we noticed that the seas are indeed one of the new frontiers and protagonists of the energy transition. And that's why I would really like to thank the Festival della Diplomazia for having organized such a timely webinar today. Indeed, the seas are increasingly important for energy production. We have very large offshore gas reserves around the world in seas. Indeed, the largest discoveries of gas in the last years have almost all been offshore. Gas is not always easily described as a transition fuel, but actually we think that it can certainly contribute a lot to decarbonization in the medium term, particularly in regions where it replaces coal and oil. And this is actually the case both in the Mediterranean basin and across the Indian Ocean. I'm thinking of South Asia and Southeast Asia. Countries in these regions are represented here today that share actually the same view that gas can help reducing coal and oil consumption and therefore cut greenhouse gas emissions, but also the emission of local pollutants. So I would like to add that to the list that has already been started today of common factors between the two regions. There's an expansion of offshore wind production, which is growing faster than onshore wind, which is constrained by land availability and often public opposition and slow authorization processes and procedures. So the seas once again offer a great opportunity for renewable energy production. There are new areas that are being explored also by Italy, such as Tidal Energy. Italy is the second largest investor in the EU in this kind of technology. Of course, it's not mature yet. There is a lot of investment in R&D. And of course, we are open to any kind of new energy. So we are also exploring these new options. The seas are sources of desalinized water, and that's very interesting. It's going to be more and more interesting. Desalinized water could be used in, for instance, green hydrogen production, as water is needed, of course, in electrolysis. And so it might be necessary to desalinize some seawater in countries that are particularly arid, as is the case of quite a number of countries around the Mediterranean. Energy is not only, the seas are not only important for energy production, but they're also important for energy trade. Two of the latest pipelines that have been built to reach Europe are both crossing seas for a large share of their route. I'm referring to Nord Stream 2, but also TAP, which has, of course, an offshore section. Waterways are vital for energy supply. This has been shown, I think, very powerfully by the Suez Canal blockade in March 2021, when the Ever Given ship was stranded and blocked trade through the Suez Canal for a number of days. Waterways are vital for not only for the trade of fossil fuels, but also for the transportation of components of equipments that are key to realize the energy transition, thinking of solar panels, but also materials that are necessary to build batteries, wind blades, fuel cells, electrolyzers, and so on. Of course, as the seas are becoming more and more important for both energy production and trade, they must become increasingly the recipients of sustainability efforts. And this, of course, calls for initiatives and actions in support of sustainability of our maritime spaces. So we are also committed, of course, to the best technologies in order to have an impact that is as small as possible and actually possibly a positive impact by investing, for instance, in conservation projects. A theme that I think is particularly important, and I'm very grateful to Mr. Triacca for having brought it to the table, is the pollution of coastal areas from shipping, and therefore the importance to work towards limiting it. I would like to elaborate a little bit on that, because Edison is actually at the forefront of these dossier. We are supporting small-scale LNG projects, and we are supporting LNG in shipping. Maritime transport accounts for around 75% of EU external trade, 31% of EU internal trade in terms of volume, and ship traffic to or from ports in the European Economic Area accounts for as much as 11% of all CO2 emissions from transport and 3 to 4% of total EU CO2 emissions. And it's particularly urgent to replace heavy fuel oils from ships. And as was said earlier, LNG is the most mature, readily available technology to replace heavy fuel oil. It emits virtually no particulate matter, and also sulfur oxides and nitrogen oxides. And it contributes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Estimates differ a little bit, but according to our estimates, there's a well-to-wake emission saving of 21% and a 28% tank-to-wake emission reduction. In addition, there are no waste disposal or discharge issues that are associated with LNG, in contrast to exhaust gas treatment systems or scrubbers that are used by shipping companies. And it's also important to highlight that LNG poses no pollution risk to ocean environments through fuel spills, in contrast to traditional marine fuels. The Fit for 55 that has been mentioned, among others, by Ambassador Constel, offers opportunities for the deployment of LNG in the maritime sector, notably from the Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Regulation that requires member states to have LNG recharging stations in all the core ports of the TEN-T corridors until 2025. But also by the Fuel EU Maritime Regulation that explicitly recognizes the role of gas as a transition fuel in this sector. Of course, there are also challenges, and some other directives are not always coherent with the spirit of the ones that I've just mentioned. So, of course, in the next months, there will be a lot of negotiations here in Brussels, and it's going to be particularly important to have a consistent approach. And once again, I think this is a common trait between the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. I know that small-scale LNG is also very interesting for some countries in South and Southeast Asia. And finally, just to conclude, some more general considerations on the importance of the role of gas as a transition fuel in the region, in the Mediterranean region. Gas is an essential partner to renewable energy as a flexible, stable source of energy. It can provide baseload supply, whereas, of course, renewable energies are intermittent. And it's probably going to play a more and more important role in the transition as countries in Europe, for instance, are phasing out coal and nuclear. We already have examples of countries in the region that have cut CO2 emissions, for example, from coal and oil use, thanks to increased natural gas use, like Israel, for instance. it's also important for Mediterranean countries to continue supporting the development of a southern gas corridor. And of course, we promote the EastMed gas pipeline, which is part of it. And this is important, particularly in this moment of high gas prices, to improve diversification of gas supplies, to improve affordability of gas procurement, and also to close the competitiveness gap between Southern Europe and Northern Europe. And of course, in the longer term, we will have to transition from natural gas to gases, and we are very much on it in projects involving hydrogen, also in Mediterranean regions like Puglia, for example, where we have recently launched our Hydrogen Valley together with partners. And so, of course, in the long term, we will have to move more towards decarbonized gases. So I hope that in these 7-8 minutes, I gave a bit of a useful overview of what we do in the Mediterranean, and of how we see the seas as more and more important protagonists of the energy transition for both energy production and trade. They offer a lot of opportunities, but of course, they also require a lot of care and attention. And at Edison, we are committed to both, seizing the opportunities offered by the seas and by energy resources in the seas that also contribute to the socio-economic development of the region and political stability through trade. But we are also, of course, committed to providing sustainability to our maritime ecosystems. So thank you again for this very fruitful discussion, and happy continuation of the event.
Thank you very much, Mr. Franza. Now we move on to our last speaker from Federpesca. Federpesca is another very important stakeholder and member of the Italy-IORA committee. The president of Federpesca, Luigi Giannini, who is not here with us today, is also president of the Italy-IORA committee. So allow me to give the floor to Francesca Biondo, director of Federpesca. Please, you have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Neri. Thank you very much for this event. And I would like to thank you, Mr. Neri, Mr. Mattioli, Mr. Gunawan, and all the excellencies and colleagues present today. Thanks also to Festival della Diplomazia, which Federpesca is partner from many years. As Mr. Neri said, I bring you greetings from the president of Federpesca and president of the Italy-IORA committee, Luigi Giannini, who unfortunately was unable to be present today for health reasons. As most of you know, Federpesca has a long history of relations with IORA countries and its institutional and economic diplomacy in the mutual interest of reinforcing cooperation and partnership in import-export sector of fishery products, but also in processing and preservation activities of fish products and in the field of research training. Today, I'm very glad to speak about the role of the fishery sector in face the environmental problems and this fundamental challenge for all the world. In fact, we all know over the years, our seas have become a real waste dump, and the plastic deposited on the sea-based and floating in water is one of the most severe threats to the environment, the marine flora and fauna, and therefore to all of us. Between 150,000 and 500,000 tons of plastic waste end up in the European seas every year. And plastic, of course, waste generated by Europe ends up in particular vulnerable marine areas such as the Mediterranean Sea. So my speech at this roundtable aims to recount the fishery sector's contribution to the marine litter problem and to highlight good practices and the issues that our fishers encounter daily in their accidental waste collection activities. In fact, Federpesca and its fishers have developed over the years many projects to assess those issues, because we believe very deep that fishers can represent the best and most effective resource of our seas, which we have to care for. In fact, the Italian fishing companies have always felt the responsibility to restore the marine biodiversity, but we think that it's now time to build around this sense of responsibility a whole system. Legislative and operational, not only in Italy, but at the European and international level to support the fishery enterprises. To contribute to this critical goal, 2 years ago, Federpesca and the Seeds and Chips Global Food Innovation Summit that was in Milan have published a manifesto to protect the sea. The manifesto's name was Humans of Mediterranean, the Generation That Healed the Sea, which was signed by 31 sectoral bodies and associations from 11 countries from the EU and the southern shores of the Mediterranean. This was one of our projects, and then we have carried out over the last years also other projects in different Italian marinas like Fiumicino, Molfetta, Chioggia. But we think that we cannot leave the marine litter problem to the sensitivity of each region or each municipality. On the opposite, it is necessary to program a proper and uniform pattern as well as incentives for port reception facilities. And it is essential to transform the experience of many pilot projects into best practices incorporated into the regulation. The scientific community is studying innovative solutions for recycling marine litter. The fishing enterprises and all fishers care about protecting the sea and are working on it. Now we expect that also the governance and the institutions can play their part. In fact, in Italy, we have not a specific legislation regulating the recovery and the recycling of indirectly collected marine waste pick up during the normal fishing trawling activities, neither at the European nor at the national and regional level. And this creates two different problems. On one end, the collected marine waste is difficult to manage by fishers due to the lack of proper instruments and practical support for the delivery at the port. But on the other hand, the potential contribution of the fishing sector to the cleaning of the seas is not fully exploited. Indeed, the huge volume of waste collected daily by the trawlers is an obstacle to the onboard operation as selection and packaging. And moreover, as per the current legislation, the fisher accidentally catching marine litters becomes the producer of the waste that may be landed, which entails, of course, economic, civil, and criminal liability. So from this point of view, a significant recent improvement in Europe is the European Directive 883 from 2019 on port reception facilities for the delivery of waste from ships. That finally includes accidentally caught marine litter among the waste of the vessel subject to its rules. But in Italy, this directive was only recently taken into consideration by the Council of Ministers during a meeting in the past August. Another significant progress in the legislative field in Italy was the law Salva Mare, Save Sea, approved by the Council of Ministers in 2019, that represent a partial and early transposition of that directive. And the important things of that law is that acknowledge an essential role for fishers in the fight against plastic at sea. But the text is on his way to and now on it's not approved yet. But I think that, however, this text and all the path that Italy and the government, the enterprise, and the scientific sector are going on is to clarify that fishery could be a crucial role, could have a crucial role to solve this problem. And of course, in the text are mentioned also provision and incentive to the fishery and also economic support to local authorities. So I think that from this point of view, we are facing interesting months in Italy, in Europe, but also in reinforcing the partnership with IORA countries. And if everyone plays its part, there are all the conditions to respond consciously to this emergency. We have all to be concerned. So the fishery sector has been ready for a long time and will for sure contribute also in the next years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to you for sharing these useful insights. And allow me also to thank not only Federpesca, but also the other members of the Italy-IORA committee who did not intervene, but I know that they are present with us here today. Well, this was our last intervention, and I would like to thank actually all that spoke today for sharing your thoughts and insights on how climate change is affecting our maritime spaces and on what we can do about that, how to transform these challenges, possibly existential challenges, into opportunities at least for joint action to set up a positive agenda and act on it. I'm also glad that the dialogue between IORA and the Union for the Mediterranean is actually moving forward. And I look forward also to act on the proposal of the Italian Commissioner to Expo 2020 Dubai, to have a high-level dialogue, Mediterranean and Indian Ocean high-level dialogue during the Water Week in Dubai next March. So thank you very much. I think we are perfectly on time as scheduled. It was very interesting. For me, it was the first time that I had the possibility and allow me to thank especially Festival della Diplomazia for recruiting me and accepting me on a very short notice as a chair and moderator of this panel, and for of course their great assistance. Thank you very much to everybody, and have a nice late morning, beginning of afternoon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Your Excellency.